Hey, thanks for joining me for this micro training course on the and, but, therefore, the ABT narrative framework. It really sits at the core of our StoryCycle Genie. And so many people have asked me about what is it exactly and how do you use it? Well, we use it for messaging. We use it for unique value proposition development. You will see within the Genie that the and, but, therefore plays an important role throughout because we found this little messaging marvel is like the most powerful way to make all of your messages land right the first time from your audience's point of view, and that's what it's really all about. So let's jump right in so you get a sense of what this Genie is all about. Let me share my screen here. So I've titled this presentation, How to Make Your Brand the Signal in Our Noisy World. And I should have probably added noisy world because it is so hard to stand out and to connect unless you have an important and powerful differentiator in the market and how you communicate it, your unique value proposition, essentially. So in the StoryCycle Genie, the and, but, therefore plays an important role, as I mentioned it. It is one of three primary frameworks that we teach, and we call everything we do at the Business of Story the applied science and bewitchery of storytelling because there is truly an applied science to storytelling. It's not just woo-woo. There are algorithms, the and, but, therefore, the 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact, the 10-step story cycle system. These are frameworks that if you follow, they work every single time. That is the applied science that then leads to the bewitchery. You know what I'm talking about here with bewitchery. It's when you hear a good story, you get excited, you get sad, happy, goosebumps, the hair stands up at the back of your neck. You have a visceral, energetic reaction to when you hear a good story because your brain is not just listening to a story. It is that neural coupling. It's sharing that story. It's seeing that experience. It's actually simulating that experience. And too few people in the advertising, branding, marketing world use story to their benefit. They lead with features and functions, logic and reason, when what your audience really wants is the emotional pull of a story. And everything we do at the Business of Story and in the StoryCycle Genie is based on what I call the DNA of storytelling, and that is the and, but, therefore. Let me show you one in action real quick. Let's say Nike, for instance. What might be their and, but, therefore, their foundational narrative framework for Just Do It? Well, they might do something like, you want to live up to your potential, and if you start today, then you'll discover the strength, health, and confidence already inside you. That is our statement of agreement. Now let's insert the problem. But you're frustrated because fear, excuses, and hesitation keep stopping you before you even begin. Now let's go to the conclusion or the call to action. We call it the statement of consequence. Therefore, imagine the pride of proving yourself right. Just do it. Nike is with you every step of the way. Setup, problem, resolution. It's the way our primal pattern-seeking, problem-solving, decision-making, limbic buying brain loves to receive information. This is the algorithm that leads to the bewitchery. Now, I have shared our frameworks with many brands around the world, including the U.S. Air Force. Walmart Canada is a big customer, teaching their people how to use it. I do a lot of work with small to medium-sized businesses in the B2B world, at the Better Business Bureau, I should say, Coca-Cola, Carvana, Hilton, you name it. So this has been something I've been training for many, many, many years. And I want to first, before we dive into the and, but, therefore, I want to show you the bigger picture of storytelling based on Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. This is where I first learned about it. When our son was going to film school at Chapman University back in, 2006, graduating in 2010, I asked him, I said, send me your books and your recorded lectures when you're done with them, because I want to know, what does Hollywood know about storytelling? And that's when I was first really introduced and studied Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey and the Monomyth. And to me, it hit me like a ton of bricks. It was like, this is a customer journey. This is an ad agency owner journey. This is a journey we all live in. So why don't they teach this framework to us in the branding, sales, marketing, and advertising world? That's what I started to do back in 2008. I took it upon myself to start sharing this big story structure with the world. And then I'm going to show you how we boil it down to the and, but, therefore. But first, I just want to share this quick video with you to get you up to speed if you're not familiar with the hero's journey of what it's all about. Check it out.
What do Harry Potter, Katniss Everdeen, and Frodo all have in common with the heroes of ancient myths? What if I told you they are all variants of the same hero? Do you believe that? Joseph Campbell did. He studied myths from all over the world and published a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, retelling dozens of stories and explaining how each represents the monomyth, or hero's journey. So, what is the hero's journey? Think of it as a cycle. The journey begins and ends in the hero's ordinary world, but the quest passes through an unfamiliar, special world. Along the way, there are some key events. Think about your favorite book or movie. Does it follow this pattern? Status quo, that's where we start. 1 o'clock, call to adventure. The hero receives a mysterious message, an invitation, a challenge. 2 o'clock, assistance. The hero needs some help, probably from someone older, wiser. 3 o'clock, departure. The hero crosses the threshold from his normal, safe home and enters the special world and adventure. We're not in Kansas anymore. 4 o'clock, trials. Being a hero is hard work. Our hero solves a riddle, slays a monster, escapes from a trap. 5 o'clock, approach. It's time to face the biggest ordeal, the hero's worst fear. 6 o'clock, crisis. This is the hero's darkest hour. He faces death and possibly even dies, only to be reborn. 7 o'clock, treasure. As a result, the hero claims some treasure, special recognition, or power. 8 o'clock, result. This can vary between stories. Do the monsters bow down before the hero, or do they chase him as he flees from the special world? 9 o'clock, return. After all that adventure, the hero returns to his ordinary world. 10 o'clock, new life. This quest has changed the hero. He has outgrown his old life. 11 o'clock, resolution. All the tangled plot lines get straightened out. 12 o'clock, status quo, but upgraded to a new level. Nothing is quite the same once you're a hero. Many popular books and movies follow this ancient formula pretty closely. But let's see how well The Hunger Games fits the hero's journey template. When does Katniss Everdeen hear a call to adventure that gets the story moving? When her sister's name is called from the lottery. How about assistance? Is anyone going to help her on her adventure? Hey, Mitch. What about departure? Does she leave her ordinary world? She gets on a train to the capital. Okay, so you get the idea. What do you have in common with Harry Potter, Katniss Everdeen, and Frodo? Well, you're human, just like them. Watch for this formula in books, movies, and TV shows you come across. You will certainly see it again, but also be sensitive to it in your own life. Listen for your call to adventure. Accept the challenge. Conquer your fear and claim the treasure you seek. And then, do it all over again.
So even if you're not familiar with the hero's journey, you may be now. It looks very familiar, right? You've seen this. It is in all great movies and books and music you listen to and so forth. It has been a framework that has been around literally since the beginning of recorded storytelling. But here's what I love about it relative to your customer journey and even the journey you're on. When you are telling a story, you always want to tell it from your prospect or your customer or your colleague's point of view. You want to place your audience at the center of the story, and that's what our StoryCycle system does throughout when it's creating your narrative strategy. Because you, as the brand or the person or the guide, are playing that role of mentor guide, helping your audiences, your prospects, your customers get what they want on their journey by following you through the progression of buying your products or your services to help level them up. But when you ask them to do that, you're asking them to change and move out of status quo. That's where we move into that special world. Change or disruption. And as we all know, change can be more difficult when it first happens, that you get through that J curve, as they call it, of trouble until you come out of the other end of it leveled up. But as you're taking people through that, you are guiding them. You are showing them the victories along the way. You are making your product or service what they need, the ideal tool they need to get through this change so that you can deliver them to the promised land, seizing of the treasure, which then returns them back to their ordinary world again, but now they're leveled up. They've had success with you, and it leads to them now sharing your story, scaling your story with their world through word of mouth marketing, and it all starts again. This was my inspiration to create the 10-step StoryCycle system, matching the hero's journey, the monomyth, to business. But instead of a closed loop, I see it as an open, expanding spiral of engagement with every revolution. What I'm talking about is when people first learn about you and your brand under brand awareness and the stories they're buying into. Then brand adoption, when they actually start working with you and buying your product or service, and then you are delivering on the promises you've made in those stories. They are now an active participant in your story, which leads to brand appreciation. And you can see how that spiral of engagement expands with every revolution to the point that now they're telling your story with their world. And isn't that really what we all want, is to be able to scale our stories? This is the overarching guide for the StoryCycle Genie, everything that's based off. This is the program that I've used for more than 20 years to grow brands by as much as 600%. And that is the StoryCycle system. I teach it, I train it, I've got a book on it, Brand Bewitchery, that is a guide to lead you through it. And of course, you now know we have the StoryCycle Genie that is all based on this. But when I'm also training, I'm looking at simpler ways than just the 10-step process to help people share stories that make a real impact in the world. And I've got this 5-step process, how to tell a short story for big impact with these 5 primal elements of a story. And I'm going to show you what that is towards the end of this presentation. But you can use these 5 primal elements in 4 different categories of stories. That connection story to build trust. That story about change, I call it the story of truth, because a lot of times people don't want to hear that change is afoot, but the truth is that it is happening, and here's what we need to do about it. They then will often, when you're asking them to change, is create an anti-story as to why they possibly can't change. That's where this story of tension comes in, or what I call the overcoming the anti-story, which you can never do with charts, graphs, facts, and stats. The only way to overcome an anti-story is with a better story. And then finally, the story of triumph, which is a different way to tell a case study. Anyways, all 4 categories of these stories can use that same story chassis of the 5 primal elements of a short story. But what it is all built on? Well, it's built on the ABT, the DNA of storytelling that uses the 3 forces of story. So let's use it just to set up this overall presentation. As a communications professional, you want to connect deeply with your audiences and quickly move them to action. But you're not connecting as deeply as you could because you push logical arguments, features, and functions when what our prospects really want is the emotional pull of a story. Therefore, hook your prospects from the start using the ABT narrative framework that tickles the primal part of your customer's brain where all of their real buying decisions are being made. There it is. Setup, problem, resolution. A very quick story that uses the three forces of story to hack through the noise and hook into the hearts of your prospects. And that's where you want to be, because we all buy with our hearts and then we justify that purchase with our heads. So we looked at Nike, a B2C company, right? Let's look, how do you use this in B2B? Well, let's take a look at what Salesforce is doing and what their and but therefore might be that leads to their unique value proposition. You want to deepen relationships with your customers, and if you can connect every interaction across sales, service, and marketing in one platform, then you can deliver the seamless experiences they expect. But you're overwhelmed because siloed systems, scattered data, and disconnected teams keep you from truly understanding your customers, leaving them feeling unseen and undeserved. Of course, that's the problem Salesforce is solving for. How do they solve it? Therefore, now you can unite every touch point to deliver smarter, faster, more personalized customer success with Salesforce, the #1 AI CRM. And by the way, this is a new UVP that they've just created, the #1 AI CRM. So you can see how this all levels up, and you can do this for your own company too. Write an ABT from your audience's point of view. What do they want relative to your offering, and why is it important to them? But why don't they have it? What frustration, what annoying negative emotion are they experiencing because of what problem that you're going to solve for them? Therefore, get them to picture what the future looks like with you when they work with you. Setup, problem, resolution. Now, where do you use the ABT? You can use it well beyond just creating unique value propositions. For instance, emails. Now, we all get ghosted all the time. And we got to write these darn emails all the time. So it's a perfect proving ground, or habit stacking, if you will. So make a goal to write 3 emails every single day using the and but therefore, so that you start strengthening your own skills with this messaging marvel. And then watch what happens with engagement. I think you are going to see it go up. But what we've learned about the ABT, and here's the shortest ABT I know. A Home Depot representative asked me this one time during a training park, what is the shortest ABT? Well, the ABT is short and sweet, but tricky. Therefore, practice, practice, practice. Your emails are a great place to practice an ABT. It's also great on all of your, Slack platforms, Microsoft Teams, whatever you're communicating on. If you are in a large enterprise, use the ABT to cut to the chase, get your point across to them super quickly. All of your social, you're going to see engagement go through the roof. And in fact, with Tremble, a SaaS provider out of Denver, back in March of 2022, they were running a LinkedIn campaign through 5 different countries and 5 different languages. And they were getting about a 3% engagement rate, which is pretty good considering LinkedIn itself says if you get anything over like 1.2%, you're doing all right. Well, in April of 2022, we took those same campaigns and reformatted them as ABTs in the different languages. I first wrote them in English, and then they translated them, of course, and they saw engagement go up by 400%. And it wasn't because of stellar copywriting. It was simply because we reformatted how they wrote those posts as an and but therefore. So that's the power of it online. It's also great to focus your presentations on a singular problem solution dynamic and or your long form communications, your long form posts and so forth. Always write an ABT for yourself first so that you know what your narrative thread is throughout that singular problem solution dynamic that you are covering in any long form presentation or content. And for any of those of you out there that have kids, it's also great to use on them to get them to eat their peas. But as they grow up, they might return the favor and use it on you. Last year, in October of 2024, I was doing a training at Agital, which is a national digital ad agency, and they have a large office here in Phoenix. And I was down working with their creatives and their account service people. And in the crowd was Lauren Howell. And this was a Wednesday morning. I'll never forget. It was a half-day training with them. That afternoon, Lauren sent me an email that said, look, I've been trying to get my dad to buy us tickets to the LA Dodger, New York Yankee Game 2 in the World Series in 2024, and it's been crickets. In fact, I sent him a note on Monday, got nothing back in return, didn't even reply to it. So this is the note I sent him after our session today. You have loved baseball since you were a kid, and you've shared that love with your brothers growing up and now with me. Your childhood dream of attending an LA Dodgers and New York Yankee World Series is happening right now within your reach. But without tickets, neither of us will experience this monumental game because we let opportunity pass us by. Let us continue to build upon our strong bond through something we both love by getting tickets to the sporting event we will both remember the rest of our lives. Buy tickets now, and Laura is such a brilliant ad professional, she even included the link to Ticketmaster. Well, guess what? It worked. He responded that afternoon. They had the tickets. He'd already bought the airfare, got it over there. And then he sent me a note next week. He said, "Thank you for teaching my daughter this wonderful new trick. Now that I know about it, I'm going to keep an eye on it, out for it all the time whenever she's asking for something." Anyways, this is one of my favorite ROIs on the ABT from last year. Just love it. But it's so powerful because it simplifies and it clarifies our message through the noise of the loud, obnoxious, abundant world we live in. Our audiences have many, many choices. And so why do you get them to choose you? Why do you get them to choose me? You do it because your unique value proposition and all of your messaging is clearly articulated through an and, but, therefore. It hacks through this noise and hooks in the hearts of what I'm talking about, us as storytelling monkeys. Now, what's interesting to me is our neurocortex, this frontal lobe, is so brilliant that we've been able to create this technology that is compounded at the rate of Moore's law. Now add AI to it, and it's probably compounding 100 times that pace. And that means we are all getting bombarded with more and more communication every single day. And yet you and I and everybody we're trying to connect with is still walking around with this fundamental monkey brain, this limbic system that has not evolved appreciably since our ancestors navigated and survived the savannah, is the same limbic system we speak to today to try to understand, navigate, and survive the onslaught of communication. So let's speak to it in the way it wants to receive information. And here's how that works. So our brain, this organ sits atop our spinal column here. It makes up 2% of our body mass, yet it consumes 20% of our calories. It burns 20% of our energy. And it has one job and one job only, and that is the survival and procreation of our being. That's all it really cares about, right? So when we're speaking to it and we confuse it, it will shut down and conserve that energy, and it will quickly whip up its own story, trying to figure out what you're trying to say. If it can't figure it out, it's going to create its own story, and it won't be the story you intended. If you confuse it, if you share obfuscation, if you share a bunch of content it just doesn't get, it's going to shut down and create a story, and it won't be the story you intended unless you intentionally tell it a story. Because the story lights up the theater of the mind. It becomes an active participant in it. It can put its dukes down and its ears up. It burns way less calories understanding how you're communicating to it. That's where the three forces of story come in. That is agreement, contradiction, consequence, as you've heard me say before, that speaks to that pattern-seeking, problem-solving, decision-making, buying limbic brain. That is the target for your story. That is the signal you want to push into the brain in that subconscious mind, the amygdala, the hippocampus. That's where the buying decisions are being made. And you do that, of course, with this fundamental DNA story structure of the and, but, and the therefore. Now, here's ABT 101. Here's how you create it. That statement of agreement. You start with your audience. As I mentioned earlier in the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell thing, your audience is always at the center of the story. And then you acknowledge, what do they want relative to your offering. They may not even know what your offering is yet, but you've done your due diligence and discovery enough that you know you can foreshadow your offering by really underscoring what they want. And then you want to raise the stakes. And why is it important to them? That's your setup. That's your statement of agreement. All you want to do is get them nodding yes. You understand me. We have a shared vision. You appreciate what I want and why it's important to me. Cool. You get me. Then you pull the rug out. You introduce the plot pivot, the problem. And that is, why don't they have what they want? What's the frustration they're experiencing because of what problem that you, of course, are going to solve for them, and you're going to solve for them in that final consequence, that statement of consequence, that therefore, how will you help them get it through your unique and differentiated offering? Setup, problem, resolution. This is how our pattern-seeking survival limbic brain loves to get information. The ABT is truly the signal in the noise. It is how you stand out in the world. Now, there's a gentleman, you may know him. He's a fairly famous marketer in Silicon Valley, Christopher Lockhead, who does a lot of work with a lot of large tech brands. And he's written one of my favorite books on branding and category design called Play Bigger. Well, I was on his show a couple years ago, and I introduced him to the and, but, therefore, and how it works. After he tried it a couple times, here's what he had to say about the ABT.
So you gave me a gift with the ABT. You know, in category design, we have this thing called a POV, a point of view. And it is simply structured very similarly to that of the ABT, which is essentially, and this is such a profound insight, it sounds like it's nothing, just like the ABT. In a point of view, it goes like this. Nobody buys a solution until they have a problem. And so a point of view starts with framing, naming, and claiming a problem. And when people understand the problem/opportunity, then they become interested in the solution. And then, of course, the third piece from a POV perspective is how your product or service, or your idea for that matter, you might not be actually marketing or selling anything, bridges the gap between the problem/opportunity and therefore the solution. Okay, so with all that said, why do I love the ABT? The ABT takes the thinking that we did around points of view and does a fantastic, legendary double click on it. And that's why the and, but, and therefore model is pure genius. It allows you to relate to people. Then it gives them the but, which tees up the problem. And then the therefore, which points the way to the different future, aka solution. And it's easily rememberable. And if you start to play with it, as I have since you taught it to me, just like anything else, you develop some prowess with it, starts working. You're like, wow, it's almost weird how this works.
And here's what he means by it's almost weird how this works. The next day after I taught him the ABT on his show, he wrote this tweet. He says, most entrepreneurs would love to design a new category and build $1 billion business. But there is so much startup BS on Twitter, it's hard to know who to listen to. Therefore, as implied, meet David Sachs. He knows a few things. And here's what blew him away. In less than 6 hours, he got over 60,000 engagements on this one tweet. Now, Christopher is a prolific social media guy. So to get this kind of engagement just completely blew his mind, and he has been using the and, but, therefore in all of his work ever since. Let's jump in and look at another ABT, Airbnb, which to me was one of the best storytellers back in the day. I think maybe they've lost their way a little bit with storytelling. But I love this example because it shows you how the ABT can also be a strategy tool. So they were doing rebranding back in 2013, and they wanted to come up with something that really helped people feel like they belong. You know, not only from the traveler, belong in any Airbnb you stay at, but to the host, being an aspirational stake in the ground that if you can't make people feel like they belong here, then you don't belong in the Airbnb family. And also with their own colleagues. We want to make sure you feel belong here in the corporation and that you are building your career in the right place. So I really love this overarching belong anywhere, unique value proposition, campaign theme, narrative arc. Now, if I was going to be presenting this new theme to the board of directors, I would build 3 different ABTs, one each for each one of my audiences. My customers, I'd create an ABT for the hosts, and I would create ABTs for the colleagues so that it is specifically focused on one audience. But for case of demonstration, let me share with you what I think maybe the ABT might be to set up this whole concept of belong anywhere. You love to travel, exploring interesting places around the world, and you wish to feel less like tourists and more like locals. By the way, this came right out of the customer sentiments from their own research. So great place to start is just repeating what your customers have told you. But you're annoyed with typical tourism because it houses you in large hotels, promotes crowded tours, and separates you from the indigenous experiences you seek. That's the problem that Airbnb is solving for, correct? Therefore, now you can feel like you belong anywhere with Airbnb. So now let's take this one step further. Let's go to the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Airbnb went in and did an economic impact study to demonstrate what it meant for both East and West Berlin for that wall coming down and Airbnb coming in. And of course, the numbers were off the charts good, and they got all kinds of free earned media all around the world for that report. But while they were doing the research, they started uncovering these amazing human interest stories that they made little short documentaries about to underscore this whole idea of Airbnb belong anywhere. And it's a way for them to demonstrate, to show this unique value proposition of belong anywhere in practice versus the brand just sitting there beating their chest saying, belong anywhere, belong anywhere. No one's going to listen to that. But when you show it to them through a true story well told, then it's the natural moral of the story. So take a quick look at this great little animated short documentaries, like 1:17 long, that underscores this belong anywhere. And oh, by the way, you are going to see not only the and, but therefore in this, but the 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact. Check this out.
Berlin, 1987. My father was a guard on the west side of the Berlin Wall, while another man guarded the east. Eventually, the wall came down, but even after moving away, my father carried a piece of it with him. While I grew up, it lingered over all of us, a barrier between him and the rest of the world. I decided I would help by taking him back to Berlin to show him the beautiful place it had become. When we arrived, the stranger who answered the door became familiar. The guard who patrolled the opposite side of the wall now welcomed us as a friend. After that, things were better for my father. Airbnb. Belong anywhere.
Now, isn't that a beautiful little tale to support the overarching brand narrative Airbnb belong anywhere? And let's take a look at it. So it's not very long. I mean, if you didn't have the animation, the music going on, whatever, you could actually tell a story in under a minute. But the 5 primal elements are this: a timestamp, a location stamp, a central character, action and surprise of that action that sets up your aha moment or your final moral of the story. So they naturally did this. They've got a location stamp and a timestamp right up top, and they introduce you to the singular central character, right? So there are the 3 of the 5 primal elements right off the bat. And what you're doing when you introduce a timestamp is you are triggering that limbic brain to pay attention, because it's saying to itself, Park just gave me a moment in time. I better pay attention, because something must have happened that I might need to respond to in case that ever happens to me. It's simply that storytelling as a learning tool. working with that survival brain. And then the location stamp. It helps like fire up the theater of the mind so they can picture it. Maybe they've been there or been to someplace similar. And then the introduction of the protagonist. And it's not talking about 2 people or 3 people or 4 people. It's always a story about one individual and what happened to them. Yeah, there may be co-players in it, like in this case, the guard, but he's a secondary player. It is all about the father. So then they move into action, right? After moving away, the father carried a piece of it with him. He had some PTSD, and so she wanted to take him back to show him what a beautiful place it had become. But here was the the surprise moment. The stranger who answered the door became familiar. The guard who patrolled the opposite side of the wall now welcomed us as a friend. And in every story, when you really look at it, there's always kind of this surprise outcome, this pivot, this novelty that our brain absolutely loves. And then this all underscores their core aha moment, right? Their brand UVP, belong anywhere. Timestamp, location stamp, central character, action and surprise outcome that leads to the moral of the story. And when you look at this, by the way, it's also a perfect and, but, therefore. My father was a guard on the west side of the Berlin Wall while another man guarded the east, and, which is implied, eventually the wall came down. They even use but to trigger that pivot. Now we're into the action of Act 2 that leads us to the therefore, which once again is implied. You could throw it in there. Therefore, things were better for my father, they simply said after that. And isn't that last line really just another way of saying, and he lived happily ever after? One of the most famous story endings we've always ever heard of, right? So something I want you to think about when you're telling your stories, and especially writing your and, but, therefore, there are really 2 extraordinary story truths. The first one is, you are not the center of your story, your audience is. Always tell your stories from their perspective. They are the ones on their hero's journey that you are going to be their mentor or guide to help them get what they want. Story truth number 2, your story is not about what you make, but what you make happen in your audience's life. Outcomes trump offerings every single time. People actually don't care about you. They don't care about your brand. They don't care about your widget. They don't care about your special storytelling skills. All they care about is how you can level them up in everything they do. So let's again look at how you build an and, but, therefore. As you know, ABT 101 is you introduce who your audience is, so you're speaking directly to them and you're thinking from their point of view. What do they want relative to your offering, and why is it important to them? But why don't they have it, and therefore, how are you uniquely equipped to help them get it? Now, you can expand on the ABT as our StoryCycle Genie does by bringing even more clarity and context to it using the if-then clause, right? So who's your audience, what do they want, and if they can get it this way, then this is the positive outcome. And it's just another way to speak to that problem-solving, decision-making, pattern-seeking limbic brain by adding more of these clauses into your ABT. In your but statement, I am a huge believer of the because, the conjunction of because. And so after the but, I want you to introduce a negative emotion because of what problem. We call this find the hurt, what are they feeling? Why are they down? And then amplify the pain with the problem that's causing it. And that word because is so important. I hearken back to a study by Harvard back in 1978 on the power of the word because to get people to do stuff. They did a really interesting study. They took a Xerox copier and they put it out in a very, very busy corridor where people would naturally line up to make their copies. Then they sent in their test subjects, and they gave them their first script was simply this. Said, excuse me, I have 5 copies. May I use the Xerox machine? Well, it's not an excuse. Actually, they're just literally asking if they can cut in line. And back in 1978, maybe people were nicer. I'm not sure. Maybe they're more empathetic, but they got 60% compliance. 60% of the people said, sure, you can cut in line. Go for it. Then a little bit later on, they would send the test subjects back in, and they would say the same thing. Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use a Xerox machine because I have to make copies? they saw compliance raised by 33%. Now, this isn't even an excuse because everybody has to make copies, but simply by putting in that conjunction of because, it has this cause and effect thing to it that it got people to comply. Then they went around for the third time, and they just asked them to actually add an excuse because I'm in a rush. And compliance only ticked up 1 more percentage point. So that is the power of the word because and why I always love to use it in my but statement of contradiction. But you're overwhelmed, but you're feeling bummed out, but you're nervous, but you're anxious, but you're fearful because of this physical problem, obstacle, gap that you have to overcome, right? Then when you get to the therefore, here's what the mistakes a lot of people make that you will never make in the StoryCycle Genie because it's programmed to keep this from happening, is they always lead with their brand right after the therefore. Therefore, buy X, Y, and Z, and then you'll get this. And that's not what you want to do. You want to keep the focus on your audience because remember, they are the hero in this journey. So I want you to think about what does success look like, right? Therefore, you are going to be free. Therefore, you are going to earn more ROI. Therefore, you are going to gain tremendous respect through your colleagues by then what? Finally, how you help them achieve that. You as the brand don't come to until the very end of this story structure, the second clause in the therefore statement. So something to really think about when you're writing all your content. Always keep it about your audience. By the way, I want to underscore here too, while the ABT uses the 3 forces of story, of agreement, contradiction, and consequence, I've learned something about this. When you do it properly, and like you can do in the StoryCycle Genie, it creates the 3 forces of trust building. And those are, number 1, you are illustrating, showing that you understand your audience by simply calling them out at the very beginning. Number 2, you are demonstrating that you appreciate what they want and why they want it. And the third one is empathy. In that but statement, you are empathizing with how they feel and you're communicating to them so they go, wow, you get me, you understand, you've been here before. So with the ABT, while it uses setup, problem, resolution, or agreement, contradiction, consequence, when you use it properly, you are instilling confidence in your audience, building that trust by demonstrating that you understand them, you appreciate what they want, why it's important to them, and you empathize with why they don't currently have it. Therefore, imagine when they get it because you are the natural way forward. Let me give you one more terrific example of this. Andre Martin Hobbs, president of Prate Auto Partes, which is a used car dealership in Quebec, Canada. He came to me back in social media marketing world after I spoke there back in 2016, I think it was, and said, I'd really like for you, Park, to help us build our story for Prate Auto Partes, which, by the way, in French means ready, car, go. When he told me it was a used car dealership, I was like, I don't know, do I really want to work with a used car dealership? And then he raised the ante a little bit and he says, oh, and by the way, we primarily focus on credit risk buyers. And all I could think of was, oh God, they're predatory. They're going to try to get these people to do whatever. And you know, so I kind of I built an anti-story in my mind as to why I didn't want to work with him. And he told me he was going to call in about 3 weeks. And I figured he wouldn't, because a lot of people say that and they never show up. But Andre, good to his word, did. And what he told me in that call really changed everything because I was telling myself the wrong story, only because he didn't have a proper, clear story to share with me. And that's what we built together. But his main goals were this. Number 1, as I mentioned, the Prate Auto Partes is a used car dealership for credit-challenged buyers in Quebec, Canada. They had to differentiate themselves from this. So as I mentioned, Prate Auto Partes is a used car dealership for credit-challenged buyers in Quebec, Canada. They had to differentiate themselves from the typical smarmy used car dealerships, and he was hoping to grow by 20%. Now, here is the brilliance of Andre's business model. He created a car dealership to help get Canadians who were down on their financial luck. It might have been because of the world global recession. It could have been they lost all their finances to a health problem. Maybe they got a divorce and had to divvy things up. He said these are good people that just want to get back on their feet, and they want to have the freedom, the luxury, if you will, and just that integrity of owning their own car. So at Prate Auto Partes, if you come in to buy a car, you have to sit through an up to 3-hour financial planning session first. You got to reveal all of your nasty little secrets in your finances, and then they will only put you in a car that you can afford to pay for. Every month, making your payments every month for 2 years to repair your credit. So his was a brand purpose that was much larger than just selling used cars to at-risk buyers, right? It was about using the industry to help get Canadians back on their feet while providing them a car. Here is the and but therefore we created that became the foundation for the entire Prate Auto Partes story that led to really an amazing, unique value proposition and campaign theme. It reads, you want the convenience of owning a car and you wish for the freedom it provides. Now, these two words, convenience and freedom, were the words that were spoken to Andre and his team when they did their customer research. This is what their buyers were saying to them. So we just put that and statement of agreement in the buyer's voice, right? Here's the problem. But you have bad credit. It's just that simple. But you have bad credit. Therefore, purchase a car you can afford to begin repairing your financial standing with Prate Auto Partes. And here's the theme, the unique value proposition this led to. Prate Auto Partes, your vehicle to financial freedom. Pretty powerful. And Andre used this line, your vehicle to financial freedom, and the entire brand story narrative for his recruiting, for his hiring, for his retention, and for how he uses social media to get his buyers to tell their story. So he has that expanding spiral of engagement. That is the StoryCycle system that has grown brands by as much as 600% because the brand first gets its clear, consistent, concise, compelling brand story in place, and then they deliver on the promises they make in those stories and get their customers to retell and scale that story. If you'd like to hear more of Andre's story, check it out, Business of Story podcast, show number 499, and we walk through the entire creation of his brand story using the StoryCycle system. By the way, it took us about 3 or 4 months to create this overall story foundation for him using the powerful StoryCycle system, but doing it the old mechanical way. Now, with the StoryCycle Genie, you can probably do it in about 60 minutes, maybe 2 hours, and have that same, if not even greater impact on your story. But this is about the ABT, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to think of the ABT as the storytelling dumbbell to build your narrative intuition. So from this point forward, I want you to write 3 emails every single day, starting with an and, but, therefore. You got to write them anyways. You may as well practice there and build your narrative intuition. Now that you know about the ABT, go and teach 2 people how to use it. I learned teaching a master's course at Arizona State University for 5 years on storytelling that the best way to learn how to really use these frameworks and understand them is to teach them to someone else. And then finally, go and review your homepage and rewrite it as an ABT, because I guarantee you 98% of your homepages are all speaking all about you, about the brand, about the features and functions, and not speaking from the point of view of your audience. And if you don't believe me, go and check it out for yourself. Go to StoryCycleGenie.ai. In fact, you might be here already if you're reading this blog post or watching this view in this blog post. Click on that Get a Free Brand Story Assessment right there. You'll just, put in your name, put in your email address, put in your URL that you would like the brand Genie to review. And under 60 seconds, it's going to give you a grade from A+ to F- on how well you are showing up in the world with your brand storytelling. And it's going to give you a 14-point brand story assessment. So you'll know exactly where you need to go to get things fixed. Everything from story structure to ABT messaging strength. And now that you know about the ABT, it could be even stronger for you, of course. Your customer struggle clarity, so on and so forth. You can read through that list and see that it gives you a whole host of intel that you can act on right now. So the StoryCycle Genie, what it really does for you, it validates what you're already doing well with your storytelling. It reveals gaps and highlights missed opportunities that you can easily fix in your storytelling. And it will even inspire you with new ways to think about your story. So as I like to always end all my trainings is, as you are growing as a more confident, compelling storyteller, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is a story you tell yourself. So make that a great one. Thanks for being here. And if you have any questions whatsoever about the StoryCycle Genie, the ABT and or the StoryCycle system, well, you've seen my email on this post throughout. Shoot me an email or even send me your ABTs, and I'll be happy to give you some coaching on it. Thanks so much for joining us today. Story on, my friend.